Welcome everybody to 1 Hour Photo. My name is John Gringo. We've got another hour of photography information for you here today. So what we're going to be doing in this 1 hour is, first up, I have pulled 10 questions from all of you folks out there that I think might relate to more than that just one person. We're going to go through these 10 questions and I'll give you the best answers that I can. And after that, we have special guest John Keatley in the studio. Great photographer, editorial, commercial, fine art work. We're going to take a look at some of his photos and I'm going to pepper him with some questions about his work. And I think we can hopefully learn a lot from him. So that's going to be a great section. And then John's going to stick around and help us critique some of your photos. And so these are photos that you have submitted into the student work gallery at the Fundamentals of Photography website. Page on the Creative Live website. So we're going to be looking at 10 of your photos there, offering up suggestions of what we like or what we don't like, and maybe what suggestions you can follow to help make your photos a little bit better the next time around. So let's go ahead and get started. And as I say, we're going to get started with your questions. So let's roll out some photography questions from you. All right, so our first question is, any advice for shooting out west, Grand Canyon area? I'm bringing a 10 to 18 wide-angle lens, an 18 to 200, polarizer, graduated, I'm assuming a graduated neutral density there, polarizers, and there's the few NDs, and of course a tripod. Is this too much? Am I missing anything? Is this too much? Are you kidding me? You should be going out there with a full truckload of gear. Well, that's what I do sometimes. But no, I think you're looking pretty good here. The 10 to 18 is going to come in really nice because there's a lot of big environments out there for the landscape photography. With the 10 to 18, I'm assuming you're shooting with an APS-C crop sensor camera. And so 10 millimeters gets you down to that ultra wide category. And that'll be a very useful lens in many cases. The 18 to 200 is one that you can leave on your camera probably most of the time. I don't see needing anything more than 200. There's just not that much that you're going to be using that big telephoto lens for. There's not a lot of wildlife out there. And so I think those two lenses are going to serve you quite well. The polarizer is something that you're going to use on a regular basis. In fact, you might just leave that on your camera almost the entire time. The graduated neutral density is also going to be a very useful filter. Anytime you're combining the land with the sky, you'll be able to darken the sky down to get everything within the exposure range of your camera. And so that's very good. And of course, you'll need that tripod either on the mornings and evening shoots, or if you get into some of those slot canyons. They can be very, very dark in there. You won't need the tripod a lot in the middle of the day if you're out kind of hiking in normal sunshine. There's just so much light out there. And so, no, I don't think that's too much. It depends on who you're going out there with and what the purpose of your trip is and how much photography is a part of that. But I think you're looking pretty good there, and I think you're set up for a great trip, and I wish you the best of luck. Next, I was born without a right hand. Every DSLR that I look at has a big grip on the right side, but I would need one on the left. Do you know of any brand that would be kinder to lefties of the world? Well, I've had a number of requests from people who either are left-handed or have special needs of this, and nobody, to my knowledge, has made a left-handed camera. I've seen maybe there might have been some prototypes, and the two solutions that I have seen out there, and one of them's not that common these days, but that was a pistol grip that some people could put on the bottom tripod mount of their camera, and you could grab that with either your left hand very easily, and if the shutter release was correctly hooked up, you'd have the half press for the focusing and then the full press for taking a picture. And so you might look for a pistol grip to see if there's anything being made out there these days. It might need to be something on the order of custom made, but it's possible. The other option is that there's a lot of cameras that have vertical grips designed for holding the camera vertically, but if you want, you can kind of hold those on the left hand. You end up holding the camera upside down and it's a little bit awkward, but at least you can grip the camera with your left hand. And so, challenging situation, and I don't know if they'll ever make a left-handed camera, but take a look at those two options and see if they can help you out. John, have you ever used the Lensbaby Velvet 56 or other Lensbaby lenses, and what is your opinion of them? So for those of you who are not familiar with the Lensbaby lenses, they are inexpensive for the most part. They're kind of these cheap, fun little lenses that do a number of different unique things. And the original Lensbaby was all about focusing in a small central area and everything else was out of focus. So it was a selective focus. So if you had a person on one side of the image, you could tilt the lens, they would be in focus, and everything else would be out of focus, but in a way that was much different than a normal lens. And so it definitely lended a unique look to your images. I haven't used the Velvet 56, but I have had a Lensbaby before, and I had one kind of as a loaner item for probably about 6 to 9 months. And it's small, it's lightweight, it's not much money, it's pretty good if you just want a different look to something, but I found that it just wasn't me. I brought it out, I took it on a bunch of different trips, I tried it, and I just decided it wasn't me. And some people love them because they want that distinctive look. Some people go through phases on them. A funny little story is I used to work in a rental department for gear, and there was a very popular group of people that rented Lensbabies, and you could almost just see who the person was. You see, okay, we got another rental for the Lensbaby. Who's this going to be? And for the most part, it tended to be women between the ages of 20 and 35 who were shooting weddings. And for some reason, that group of people really got into that look, and it allowed them to shoot portraits that had a unique look. It's not completely, or it's not that unique in the photography world, but for the clients, it definitely provided a unique look at not too much money. And so it's something you may want to play around with to see if that's really your thing or not. I have a Nikon D7000 and want to upgrade. Which is better, Sony a6500 or Sony a7 II? This is a tricky question to answer because I don't know what you are trying to do in your photography. I don't know what your budget is. Just on the question as it stands right now, the Sony a7 II is a higher resolution. Let's see, is it a higher resolution? No, it's the same resolution, but it is a full frame sensor compared to a crop frame sensor. So it's technically the better camera. Now, is it really the better camera for you? Maybe, maybe not. The Sony a7 II is going to require more expensive lenses that are much larger in size. And so if you said that you were doing travel photography and you like to bicycle travel and being lightweight was very important, or you had a bad back, or you didn't like lifting up heavy cameras, then the a6500 would be better. And this is a common problem when people are asking questions about equipment. What is better, this or that? It really depends on what you are doing. And so I have a hard time answering these questions because I want to get you the best gear for what you're doing. And if I don't know what you're doing, it's kind of hard to recommend something. They're both really good cameras that are very, very capable. The 6500 would be my choice if I was into travel photography. Also might be my choice if I was into sports or wildlife photography because of the telephoto capabilities and the advanced focusing system on it. If I was into portrait or landscape photography, probably the Sony a7 II. All right, I need to get a new computer, install Lightroom, and download my pictures. Okay, well, that's a good start. Could you give me recommendations on type or specs for a computer to use for my photos? Well, I think almost any computer is going to do the job these days. Macs and PCs both are running with enough RAM power and processing power that they're going to handle all these normal files from normal cameras. Now, if you're going to get into a 50 megapixel camera or greater, then you're going to need to look in at getting maybe either more memory or faster processing on your computer. But for your most cameras, most computers are going to be able to handle it. Now, one of the key things for anybody getting into photography is that you do not want to store your photos on your computer. Photos take up a lot of space in general, and they're going to clog up and slow down any computer you have. And so you're going to have to put together some sort of external hard drive system. And it can be very, very simple. You can have one external hard drive, which is where your photos are stored, and when you want to access and download and work with them, you plug that in. Now, because all hard drives will fail eventually, you should have a backup. And ideally, you should have a backup to that stored in an off-site location in case something happens right here with your computer. And so there is a little bit to get set up there. I don't think you need to be too much worried about your computer. I use Apple Mac. I know people who use PCs. I know there's fanboys of both clubs, and frankly, they're both going to work just fine these days. But make sure you get yourself set up with some hard drives so that your photos are stored safely in that regard. I travel a lot, and it's very cumbersome to carry my full-frame Nikon system. What is your opinion of switching to the Fuji X-T2? Nikon is too bulky for travel, and I don't see them coming up with mirrorless anytime soon. Okay, so yes, Nikon and mirrorless, they do have their little one system. We'll let that be aside for the moment. I don't know if Sony's going to come out with a mirrorless system or not. I'm sure they've been working on something, and they're just kind of waiting to see when they might want to release something. So if you are currently using a Nikon system and the full-frame system is a bit too big to travel, I can understand that. The X-T2 is a smaller camera and the lenses are smaller. And I do have to admit, I am a big fan of Fuji. I think they are doing a lot of things right. They're not perfect. Trust me, they're not perfect. But the X-T2 has very good image quality. It's got good 4K video on there if you want to shoot video as well as when you're traveling. And you could travel with a 2, 3, or 4 lens package system with Fuji and reduce the size of your camera bag probably by about 30%. And so I think it's a great choice. I'm not a big fan of switching just because there's a lot of money in switching. But if you did want to save bulk and weight, I'm a big fan of that Fuji X-T2. If you had to pick between a 5DS and the Mark IV, which would you choose and why? Well, glad you asked this because I have been owning a 5DS for almost the last year, and I recently purchased the 5D Mark IV. And the 5DS is a great camera. It's a nice upgrade in many ways to the 5D Mark III. And I originally bought the 5DS because I did a test, and I did a test that no one else that I know had done, is I shot the 5DS at its medium resolution of 28 megapixels. And I wanted to see if it surpassed the Canon 5D Mark III. And in the test that I did, it did surpass it. And so that was enough for my standard shoots. And if I wanted to, I could throw it in the turbo mode, get it up to 50 megapixels, and I would have a 50 megapixel camera, which was nice. But the thing that I didn't like about the 5DS is it's a little bit on the slow side. Those 50 megapixel files are fairly large, and it wasn't killing me, but it was just kind of something that was I didn't really like that much. The 5D Mark IV has got a number of really nice new features on it, and it fits more of my style shooting. And so you asked me which would I choose, and so that's why I'm answering this question for me. Now, for which one's better for you, it really depends on what you're doing. But mostly the 5DS is going to be for people who are going to be printing large. If you're not printing large, the 5D Mark IV is probably going to make a better camera. One of the things that I noticed about the 5DS is that you do get a fair bit of noise once you start getting above ISO 800, depending on how large you print your images and so forth. And the new 5D Mark IV is much, much better at low light work, much better for action. It's a much better general purpose camera. And this does bring up kind of another question, and that is how many megapixels do you need? And is there a limit as to where we are going? I have no doubt technology is bringing us into more and more pixels in the future, but there is a point of diminishing returns and there's a point of limitations of everything else. If you have a 5DS, you better make sure that every lens in your arsenal is really the top of the line lens. You're not going to be able to afford to have any of those cheap lenses in there because then you're not getting that 50 megapixel quality from it. And so it just something that you're going to have to raise your standards on everything you do. You might need to be using a tripod a lot more often because every little bit of movement is going to be more clearly seen in an image with 50 megapixels. Does one need power converters in Cuba? All right, so I'm assuming you're asking me because I go to Cuba on a regular basis. You do not need power converters so long as the charger for your equipment, whatever that is, the computer, your cameras, can handle the standard worldwide voltage, which I believe is 120 to 240. And so what you do need is a plug adapter because they will sometimes have this 2 flat plugs that we use here in the United States, but for the most part they use the 2 round plugs, which is very common in Europe. But because it's a developing country and the standards are a little bit loose from one place to another, East Coast to West Coast, you probably want to get one of those universal adapters that can fit a number of different plug-ins. But mostly you just need the 2 round plug-ins, and If your charger says 120 to 240 on it, it can handle the voltage from that full range coming through any converter. And so, nope, don't need it, but do need those plug converters. What are the best lenses for portrait photography for a Nikon D50? And he's actually getting 2 questions in here. And what would be the best lighting equipment for portrait, continuous lighting or strobes? All right, let's go for the first part of this. Best lenses for portrait photography for a D750. I did a class on lenses, on Nikon lenses. And in the class, I wanted to compare all the lenses available for shooting portraits. And we shot everything down to a 14 millimeter up to an 800 millimeter. And when you say portraits, I'm thinking, head and shoulder type portrait. And using the different lenses really changes the shape of the face, how much of the face you can see. And my determination was everything from about 70 millimeters up to 200 looked really good. And so the 70 to 200 2.8 lens is super popular with a lot of portrait photographers because it gives them pretty much everything they need in that range at a pretty fast aperture of f2.8. Now, some people really get into liking particular focal lengths, or they'll want to shoot with an even faster aperture. So the 85-1.8, the 85-1.4 lenses are kind of the classic favorite of most portrait photographers. Nikon recently introduced the 105-1.4, which is it's a shot put of a lens, okay? It's pretty big and it's very heavy, but it looks to be a beautiful lens that has beautiful extreme bokeh. That's the out of focus area. And so the 85 and 105 are going to be really popular fixed focal length lenses, but the 70 to 200 2.8 is going to be one of those general purpose, something that a wedding photographer would have. And they're going to choose that over some of the fixed focal lengths in many cases because they're dealing with so many different situations. Sometimes they're inside, sometimes they're outside. They don't have control over the environment. Somebody working in a studio or who really knows a lot about their setups is more likely to choose their prime focal length. So you can go with zoom or prime, but look for any of those lenses that I just mentioned. All right, what would be the best lighting equipment for portrait, the continuous lighting or strobe? I'm not a lighting expert, but there are 2 different types of lighting. The continuous lighting, like here in the studio, we have these continuous lights on right now because we're shooting video. But you also have the option of shooting strobes. And one of the big advantages of strobes is that they are much more powerful. And so continuous lighting is nice for smaller objects or close in. But the problem is it's not that bright, so you may need to be raising up your ISO, you may need to be using faster lenses. When you have strobe equipment, if you are shooting multiple people or you're working in a larger environment, you can have those strobes need to be back further. They need to be 10 or 20 feet back. They're going to have the power. And so this is going to determine what type of shooting you're doing and how big of area you have. And so if I was doing a lot of portraits, I would probably want to be shooting with strobes in most cases because they're going to stop the movement. They fire very, very quickly, and so you're going to have fast shutter speeds, but the light's going to be moving or turning on and off very, very quickly, so it's going to stop subtle little movements that might be going on in there. And so I'm going to stick with strobe lighting. I do use continuous lighting for some things and strobe lighting for other things, but I'm going to say with portraits, I would stick with strobes. All right, it is time for our special guest here in the studio. I'd like to welcome John Keatley. Thanks for being a part of this.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
All righty. So John's brought some, go ahead, have a seat. John's brought some photos that we're going to get into here in just a moment, but I just want to talk to you just a little bit because I'm sure we got some people who aren't familiar with you and your work. And I've done some looking at your work, and you got some beautiful editorial and commercial and some fine art work. What sort of work do you like to do, and how do you see that fitting into the world of photography?
Well, I guess if I look over my career as a whole, what I like to do constantly changes and evolves. Sometimes I feel like I'm too finicky, but I think I'm just a curious person, and as I grow and learn, my interest, professionally and as a person changes. So right now, I'm focused primarily on advertising and fine art, or just personal work in general, I guess you could say. When I started out, I started doing weddings and pretty much anything I could get my hands on. Really? And then as I grew, I guess dissatisfied with that, I discovered editorial photography, and I loved the mystery and the challenge of breaking into that. And then as I got more into that, I started learning more about myself and realized that I like to control things. And So advertising became kind of the next step because you do get to control. It's more affected. It's more deliberate. Whereas like editorial was just hard for me because there's so much that it's just a surprise, and you have to just, you show up and this is your place you have to work, and what are you going to do with it, kind of thing. I'm more of a planner, and I like to know what I'm getting into. So that's kind of been the quick arc of it. And I guess again, right now, what I like to do is I like to create characters. I like to create. I hate to say stories, but I like to create kind of images that focus on a theme or a topic that gets people thinking in a certain way.
So we're going to be looking at some work here in just a moment, and I guess I kind of want to go to your creative process.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you come up with an idea and you make it real in photographs, how close do you get, or I guess how defined is that idea? Do you just kind of have I want to do something in this genre, and you figure it out photographically, or do you like come up with specifics?
I usually come up with very specific ideas of what I'm going to do, but then what the end result is may or may not be that. Sometimes it's exactly as I planned. I did a shoot a couple weeks ago, and it was not at all how I planned. I got there and just realized like it was much better in my head, and visually it doesn't make any sense. I mean, this was a bit of an extreme example. I got there and it was just like there was no part of this one particular idea that made any sense. But the good news was some new ideas emerged and developed with the people I had in the location that I was at. And so I ended up getting 2 pictures out of the shoot. I was only intending to get 1. I ended up getting 2 that I like, even better, I would say, but they had nothing to do really with the original idea. So that happens, and I think you have to be open to life, even for a control freak like me. In any setting, I think if you're too focused on your ideas, then you have to live and die by the fact that you're not perfect, and a lot of your ideas are not going to be good. But I do think if you're open, you could potentially always get something great, no matter what the situation is or what your idea was originally.
Now, do you work alone? Do you work with a team? Do you have assistants? And I guess that kind of doubles up as far as your personal work versus your business work.
Yeah, I mean, yes is the answer to those questions. I guess my team looks a lot different if I'm working on my own on a project that I'm funding myself. My team is as small as possible. But if I'm working on an ad campaign, there could be a very large team. But then sometimes there's even ad campaigns that are smaller too. I'm very much take the approach of I don't ever want to have lights or people just for the sake of having lights or people. I think I always try to have what we need to do the job well. It's just waste if you're trying to do it for to impress people or whatever it is. I like
putting on a show.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes the crew can be quite large, but in general, there's usually myself, an assistant, and probably a hair and makeup artist or like a wardrobe stylist.
What are some companies that you've done work for?
Oh goodness, I've done work for the San Francisco MoMA. I've done work for Mexico Tourism. I've done work for Amazon and Microsoft and lots of companies and things like that.
And so now, are these companies coming to you with their idea that they want you to fulfill, or are they wanting something for you to come up with something?
One big shift that I see in commercial photography is that companies aren't really looking for photographers anymore because there's so many of us. Like photographers are, if we're talking professionally here, there's a lot of photographers. So the value on a photographer has gone way down. So what I see happening more and more now is companies are looking for art directors in a sense. Now, sometimes there's an idea and it's pretty specific, this is what we're doing, and they want you to put your own spin on it, whether it's like, we want you to light this in your way or, elicit the response or reaction or mood that you typically do. So that certainly still happens, but there are other times when they present a very loose idea or even a goal. We're trying to use humor to drive more foot traffic through the stores kind of thing, and they look to you for ideas, along those lines. And there's certainly analytics and data and things that you have to look at and stuff like that. But I'm finding that I get pulled into more of those strategy meetings now than I used to. It used to just be, take this picture, but that doesn't happen so much anymore.
Interesting. So one of the questions that I want to try to ask everybody that I get to interview, and that is, because I got a lot of people who are, they're just doing photography for fun. But so many, almost everybody who picks up a camera and starts shooting starts immediately thinking dollar signs.
Right.
I can make money shooting. What % of your work time is actually shooting photos?
Oh boy. Probably like 3%.
3%. Okay, that's pretty terrible. So if somebody wants to just pick up photography and do it on Sunday,
right,
they're better off.
I mean, I always say, if I meet someone who does photography for fun, I always say, that's the best. I mean, it should just be for fun, right? I mean, and I think we live in a culture today where, and I do this to people all the time, if someone expresses any interest in anything, our first response is, oh, you should do that, Like, I really love cooking. And people are like, oh, you should be a cook. And I was like, well, then I wouldn't enjoy it anymore. Like, I do it because I like to do it slowly and decompress and just, calm down after work. I don't want to be in a kitchen being yelled at or yelling at people and having to serve 200 people in a night, And so sometimes if you just enjoy photography, I think it's important to understand what it is that you enjoy about it. And you may actually derive more joy not having to rely on it for an income. So that's my cautionary 2 cents, But yeah, I mean, it's a business,
Right.
Any business is hard. And I could talk about why I think business is even harder today than it has been in the past. But if you want to maximize your time taking pictures, I would caution you before you get into doing it for a living. So
yeah. So being a control freak, you work in the studio a lot and kind of on sets a lot. So if you go on vacation, do you just like shoot pictures with your phone, or do you have like a casual camera? Do you kind of like?
I have a casual camera. It gets used probably like 3 or 4 times a year. I rarely am taking pictures if it's not like a specific idea that I've produced for work or for myself, kind of thing. So, if we go on vacation, I'll take I have a small Fuji. It's just, I mean, I have other cameras I could take, but I specifically don't take them because I don't want.
You don't want to be tied down to all that.
With it, yeah. But lately, I take a lot of pictures with my phone. Yeah.
So, with what you do, when are you most excited about what you're doing? Is it like in a shoot, or do you like sitting down planning something? What's the part of the process that you just dig into? You're like, okay, today's good. Today I get to do this.
I would say, I enjoy parts of planning. It's also very stressful. A lot of that's probably, self-inflicted. Someone with a better demeanor and someone more well-balanced than myself would probably enjoy it more. But I do enjoy parts of planning. I enjoy the shoot day immensely. That would probably be, off the top of my head, my most enjoyable, because you have to trust at that point all the work that you've put in. You have to trust that it is what it is at this point. There's no changing anything. We've already kind of figured all the details out. So you just enjoy the moment, and you finally stop, or at least I finally stop stressing out, and I'm just there and in the moment, and I love that. And then probably one of my least favorite is going through the images afterwards, because then I'm just a ball of nerves, and I'm thinking about all the things I did wrong and wish I had done differently. And I struggle with the editing process. I struggle with even just forcing myself to sit down and do it. But then probably the next favorite moment, I'm giving you many, because there are many moments that I enjoy.
Yeah,
but
there's different peaks.
I enjoy, I work with a retoucher, so I don't do my own retouching. I enjoy getting the images back and seeing them finished.
The finalized versions.
Yeah, and that's exciting. And then more recently, what I've discovered is I love printing.
Oh, right.
I just did my first solo exhibition and kind of was forced to buy a printer and do it on my own and learn it. And I didn't want to do it as a reluctant decision, but I had no idea how much I would love that process. What
do you love about that?
There's something very tangible, obviously, about making a print. You experience the work in a different way, on a different scale. You see things that it sounds funny because, you can see anything, obviously, on the monitor, but you really actually do see things that you never would have seen or noticed on a screen. And I don't know, there's just something very rewarding about that process. You know, working with your hands and seeing a physical result. So
good. Well, let's get to some photos, and you've got a great collection here. And talk to us just a little backstory about these first few photos that we're going to see.
Sure. So this project or series I titled Con Man, and I really enjoy coming up with ideas or kind of, I often say what if moments, like thinking about what would it look like if this had happened, or even something as simple as if I was in a restaurant and sometimes people are talking to me and I'm not there anymore because I'm imagining what if the waiter came over and said this socially inappropriate thing or whatever it is. And so in this particular point though, I was thinking a lot about identity, and so this project was a very kind of superficial visual question or exploration on identity in terms of how we view others.
Let's bring up the second photo, and people can start seeing the similarities here.
So if you haven't figured it out, this is a series where it's the same person in every single picture. There's 7 or 8 final images in this project, and basically we used wardrobe, hair and makeup, and some just very light prosthetics, if you will, like moles and wrinkles and things for aging. And so I wanted to see what was the range of one human face, and how do we respond or judge or view that person simply by what they're wearing and how they look, despite the fact that it's actually the same human being underneath. So that's the backstory on this. And this would be one, going back to a question you asked earlier, where this turned out exactly how I had planned. I think usually a lot of my close-up portraits, they tend to go exactly how I'm planning. When you start to pull back and you see more and show more in a photograph, that's when things don't always end up exactly, because there's just so many more moving pieces and things to consider.
So this is a personal project, correct?
Yes.
And so what is the status? What are you doing with this project at this point?
Well, at this point, ultimately, I'd love to show this at a gallery, show the prints in a gallery. I think this particular series, at least 3, if not all of them, need to be shown together. So,
how many do you have in the series?
There's 7 or 8. There's 7, and there's an 8th one that's kind of a spin-off, but it could go with it. So, basically, that's where I'm at right now. I mentioned I did my first show in January. It was a different project, but it's going back to how much do you shoot. It's just a lot of work of putting your work out there, showing it to people, talking to galleries, finding hopefully eventually a gallery or a curator that connects with that work and sees a fit. So right now it's just showing it and talking about it and doing this kind of thing, and hoping to find people who connect with it or resonate. It's something that resonates with them.
And so with this actor model, was this done in one day, or is this done over weeks?
This was done in one day, yeah.
That must have been a heck of a day, because I know you're working with makeup artists,
right,
and a team to get this done, and it would seem like it would take quite a bit of time to get from one to the next.
Well, and this goes back to, again, you're asking about crew size. This was a personal project, so would I have liked to have done it over 2 or 3 days? Yes. Could I afford to do that? No. So you kind of have to just work with your constraints in reality. So,
yeah. Well, I think fantastic photos. I mean, just individually, they're very nice photos, excellent. But as a group, it's really fun.
Thanks.
Especially, I mean, I love hiding the fact of what it is at first, because you actually did a show here and had the photos up, and I wandered in and I looked, and it took me, I'm not going to say how long it took me. It took me a period of time to figure out, okay, I got it. And it's that revelation is a lot of fun.
Cool.
All right, so we have some other different work here, and this is looking like Death Valley to me.
It is Death Valley, Badwater Basin.
And so the photographer in me just wants to jump out and say, how did you get the water out there?
Well, there actually is. There, at least when I went, there was some water.
Oh, okay.
Right around the parking lot at Badwater.
Oh, okay, I've been there a couple of times. There was no water, so I was just wondering if you said, okay, we're going to need water, and so you had to bring out water tanks and put that out there. And how do you legally get around all that?
Yeah, I mean,
but this is just naturally there.
That was naturally there. I mean, I'm not.
Did you get lucky, or did you plan for that? Did you scout it out?
Well, I scouted it out online. I mean, I had never been before, but I knew that I wanted to do something like this, and so it was just a lot of looking around online and trying to figure out where, and there's, the Salt Flats in Utah and Badwater Basin, and there was some places, I can't remember all the different places I looked at, but this was one that I was really drawn to, so I planned a road trip out, and I think was there for maybe 2 nights and 3 days, and was up every day before sunrise and out every day, until sunset, just driving around. So we spent the first couple of days just kind of scouting while we were there. And then on the last day, shot this, and it was actually more midday that this image was shot. But it's so flat and barren and just bright that it didn't really matter. So
nice. All right, let's go on to the next one. All right, so I need a little explanation.
This is really just right place, right time. I mean, this was as actually I should mention the last shot was a composite as well. The diver was shot on a separate time from the location, and the same with this. This is currently I'm working on, I call these conceptual landscapes. And this was one of the first ones that I did, and I was collaborating with a retoucher and just kind of exploring the opportunities of this new world to me as I discovered retouching, and kind of telling these ideas that are bigger or outside of what's possible in reality. And this picture actually was taken just randomly, like a snapshot on I think we were on a whale watching tour up, my wife and I. And then later on, as I had this idea of exploring kind of what it's called, there's 3 images in the series called Falling Bodies. This was one of the images, and I shot the other images for this, but this was one image that I had in my archive already.
And we got one more that's part of the series here. Now, did you photograph the people, or is that like a painting?
No, the people, so that was probably the hardest part of the whole shoot, was finding a woman who was willing to jump naked on a trampoline. 99% of the time, if someone asked you to do that,
Was that a Craigslisting that you had?
No. I mean, it sounds like a Craigslist ad. Most people turn me down for good reason, but I found someone who eventually was willing to do it. And what I learned in hindsight was, fortunately, she was a personal trainer and incredibly fit. And I rented a professional gym where I think some athletes would train and things like that. And they had like an Olympic trampoline. And so we rented it after hours when it was closed down. And I had no idea how hard. I was just thinking I'd get someone jumping and take some pictures. And I realized very quickly, well, when they're jumping up, their hair is flowing down. That doesn't look natural. If you catch them at the peak when they're moving the least, and so there's less less blur.
Right.
I was thinking that would be ideal because then I don't have to worry about the body blurring. Well, then everything's kind of suspended, so that doesn't. So then I realized I actually have to catch them falling down. And then the problem became, even on a trampoline, a human is not going to just let themselves fall because you're going to brace yourself. No one's going to. You just can't let yourself trust that you're. So it became really difficult to get these images to actually work and feel like they were falling and feel like they had really kind of given up in a sense. And then the other thing I realized was how painful and difficult it was to actually jump and land on this trampoline, because these large trampolines we were using were like thick strips of cloth, and so. Oh. Her back was just like a waffle at the end.
Would you, in retrospect, would you have chosen a different way to shoot the falling body?
I mean, I don't think there's any other way to do it that I'm aware of, but it was more difficult.
I was just thinking like you could have, it's a one-time thing, but you could have someone jump off a high dive and just fall backwards. But background is hard, and it's one time, and then your hair's wet.
I mean, that's like a belly flop on your back. I don't know if that would be any.
Well, if you do it on the 3 meter dive, or the 1 meter dive, I don't know. Yeah, but that's a tough one. All right, what else we got here?
So this was a shot I did. This was for an ad campaign for Mexico Tourism. This was about a little over a year ago. This is Patricia Heaton from Everybody Loves Raymond. I can't remember the new show she's in, but they're basically. I was contacted by an ad agency who was working on a campaign, and they had a series of commercials for this campaign too. But this was right after Hurricane Patricia, and so people didn't want to travel to Mexico because they heard this hurricane and things were terrible. So they did a campaign called Patricia's Welcome, and they had a contest where anyone named Patricia could enter and win a free trip to Mexico. And so the idea around the campaign was to show everyone that it's fine, there's nothing to worry about. It wasn't that big a deal. So that's where this this came from.
All right, so a little geek talk. Lighting, she's really well lit here. I mean, it almost looks like a composite.
It is a composite, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was wondering, how did you light that up
Yeah.
on the beach so well? And so it is a composite?
I mean, yeah, it's the kind of thing when you're working with celebrities and especially in conjunction with film sets, you know, we had about 5 to 10 minutes with her, and it was on a break from filming. So, you know, we went out and scouted several beaches a couple days in advance and shot hundreds of plates of beaches and things like that. And then once we decided on the plate, we lit her to match. So I have assistants standing in, and you try to get an idea of the angle of the light on them and that sort of thing.
Right.
And then you mimic that and enhance it in studio when you light it, so that ideally when you put her in, it will look as natural as possible.
Right. Excellent.
This was a shot that I did for another ad campaign for Seattle Humane. And so they were creating an ad campaign to raise money for a new facility that they were going to build. So the concept behind this one was called Animal People Can. And so it was showing people kind of from all walks of life and how animals are just part of their life, good and bad. So this one was something along the lines of, you don't need an alarm clock kind of thing. So they were trying to show that animals make life better. It doesn't mean that life's going to not be messy at times. Some of the images were a little more wild, but that's where this image came from.
Yeah, and I could see how they would contact you for doing these types of images. Now, this one is the one image of the group that you submitted that just seems different than the rest. Mm-hmm. So tell me about this one.
Well, I'd be curious to hear from your perspective why, but...
I am a big fan of kind of something that you have in a lot of yours. I love symmetry. I love, everything's very, very, for the most part, extremely clean. Here we just have a little bit more lifestyle.
Right.
And it's a little bit more of a loose shot.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's why I'm curious about this one and the wig on the dog.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, so this is, again, same campaign. It's kind of, again, showing how animals become part of your life. And so here we see this individual, you get a sense of like their lifestyle, what they're into, and it kind of shows, like, again, how the dog is a part of that lifestyle. It's a companion, it's deeply, connected to who you are. So we were trying to show that bond and that connection between the person and the animal. It's interesting. I mean, I think this shot was taken in a home that we did another shoot for, and I picked, I think probably what the first location we shot, which was a family, was probably the most balanced and symmetrical and clean environment in the house that we were in. And so then it was like, how do we take another shot that not in the same place that doesn't, we're trying to differentiate everything. So I think my options in that sense were a bit limited, and this just made the most sense to me. But it is much looser than what I typically do. And I think sometimes I have to try to force myself to do that, because sometimes when you're so focused and so narrowly holding on to this one certain thing, you can lose, Got
to change things up a little bit.
Yeah. So
now, did you have to wait till evening to shoot this? Because I see that purple light just seeping through.
No, this was shot midday.
Oh, really?
But going back to kind of what you were talking about earlier with strobe and continuous lighting, strobe is so powerful you can black out daylight essentially. So, the sun was, I think, on. There's a fence right outside the window, and if I remember, some of that we did just do in post, but we did use light to knock everything down quite a bit. So we even though there was daylight coming in from the window, you're only seeing strobe. So we put a gelled light outside the window.
Okay, nice. And so we got your final series of photos here, which I think are great. So tell us, we don't have too much time, but
Sure.
kind of the background on this. And
This series is called Uniform, and this is kind of a continuation of the con man images that we talked about earlier, where I'm exploring a little more than simply visual identity, but it was, in a nutshell, trying to kind of figure out how something like war in the military became this like plastic toy that marches.
Toy Story.
Toy Story. It's just there's no context. There's nothing controversial about it. But if you start talking about real human life and war, it's very controversial. So for me, it was an exploration of humanity. There's these toys that are clearly human, but we don't have much regard for them in in the sense of the humanity of them. So what I wanted to do was create this iconic graphic image that we all recognize, but with humans. So, and especially when they're printed large and you can kind of experience them like we were talking about in physical form, the humanity really kind of jumps out at you. And so that was the idea and the exploration behind this.
Well, I think they're fascinating. It just really bridges two very different worlds. I mean, toys and war, and it draws a connection that I haven't seen before.
Thank you.
Which I think is really fun. I think it's very fascinating. Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions and sharing these photos with everybody. I hope everybody was able to pick something up from this. With our remaining time, if you don't mind sticking around, we're going to take a look at some photos from everybody else. I'm going to go ahead and just take a moment and switch over to our Lightroom catalog. Okay, first up from Erica Green. And, you know, I'm just looking at this thinking, I thought that this was submitted upside down. And I wasn't sure if she did that on purpose or if my computer just flipped it around. But I'm pretty sure that she had it listed or posted upside down, which is actually what caught my attention on this. And so I guess we could review it either way. And so I was actually more fascinated with it upside down just because it changed my perspective on things. And so normally I wouldn't post a photo upside down, but this is one of those ones that I think it just, I don't know, it makes you look at it a little bit differently. And so I'm actually just shocked because I think Lightroom in my catalog flipped it around for some reason on its own. And so now I don't know what to say about it. But I think it was an interesting take just because every once in a while there are photographs that you can flip upside down. I don't know if you've ever done that.
Well, I mean, I do it for different reasons, but I think sometimes when I'm editing, turning an image upside down, sometimes I can't see color unless I do that because I'm focused on expression and things like that. So sometimes when I'm editing, I'll actually do it upside down because it allows you to see things. It's kind of like, I think, if you learn to draw, I think in basic drawing, they talk about drawing something upside down because your brain isn't focused on
the details.
You're able to just think clearly about line and perspective and that sort of thing. So.
And if you work with a view camera, a 4x5 or an 8x10 camera, you see the image on the ground glass upside down.
I don't know how people do that. I could not.
And so I've turned images upside down for compositional reasons, just to kind of look at the edges a little differently and the proportions of size things. And so that's, I think, those two good tips. One for composition, but one for color. I think that works out well. All right, let's go to the next image. And we're looking at a beach image with a little bit of snow. I'm trying to see if I recognize this place. And I love the clouds in the sky. I'm not sure if there's a spot on your sensor or if that's a bird. And do you shoot much landscape stuff?
Only for, when I'm doing conceptual landscapes, but typically it's not part of my...
Not part of your... Yeah. And so one of the things, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, I will clone out a bird if it's so small that it just seems awkward and distracting. Yeah. And I know that it was naturally there, and you can get into the whole Photoshop.
You're asking the wrong guy. I mean, I'll do anything. I don't have any problem with anything. But if you're working for a newspaper, you probably need to leave that bird in there.
Yeah, you definitely would. As far as journalism ethics kind of fit into their own special category in photography, and everyone else is kind of up to their own. And with what you're doing, it seems like it's all about the final image. What's in the final image? Right. And everyone gets to draw their own little line in the sand as far as how far they want to take things.
Yeah. Well, I think, just personal opinion, I think, again, like you said, it depends on what your personal preference is, but I think oftentimes we limit ourselves by thinking of photography as this documentary tool, which it can be. But if you think about, if you're interested in just creating, photography should be thought of no differently than painting, right? I mean, you could paint something that makes no visual sense to others, without understanding where it came from, but no one's going to question it, But I think for photographers, we get so caught up in those details. So I think you're right. It just depends on what you're interested in and what you're trying to achieve with it.
All right, and so this is what happens when you talk about photos. You kind of get sent off on tangents. And back on the photo here, one of the first things I look for in a photograph is a subject, and I'm not getting a strong subject here. I'm seeing a lifeguard stand, and I guess I would like a little bit more tangible. There's some nice elements. I mean, you got a nice sky, The snow on the sand, I think, has potential, and maybe there's some neat patterns in it. And so I think the scene needs to be worked a little bit more on its own. It's not bad, but it's not catching me with anything.
I think this, the horizon on the water seems to be, it's like
Is it a little
off
off?
balance to me.
And
but-
so one of the things I'd love to be able to do is go into Lightroom and see if we can just kind of fix that, because the human eye can be very, very sensitive to the horizon. And so there you go. There, a couple percent better.
Feels a little better, yeah.
Yeah, and so don't want to have those horizon lines off. All right, excellent. Let's go to the next one. And this feels like Europe to me. And I'm going to drop off this bottom just to get it a little bit bigger. And this is Marcello Maselli. And so one of the things, and we talked just about this, about symmetry, and it looks like you kind of embrace that in a lot of your photographs. And this type of photo bugs me because it's like they're not quite in the center of the sidewalk. And it's kind of like you want to be when you got everything else so symmetrical on that. Any thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I would agree. I think if you're going to do it, it could be over a little bit. For me, when I look at this photo, and this is personal preference, but I get the feeling of walking into which doesn't happen to me all the time, but I get the feeling of walking into a room where the ceiling's too low and I have to duck down. Like I feel kind of restricted by the lack of headroom, so to speak. So for me, I'd prefer to see more sky and maybe less pathway, but it's a beautiful image.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful place. The other thing I would maybe try is, I feel like we're a little too close with the wide angle lens because that roof is kind of fading away. I wouldn't mind seeing this backed up if you have the lawn to give you the space, backing up a little bit further with a more normal or maybe even a telephoto lens, unless there's something in the foreground, but it's just kind of a plain sidewalk. And so that's why I might try a longer lens on that one. All right, let's go to this next one here. So we got black and white from Anthony Kriz, and I love black and whites. I'm starting to shoot more black and whites myself. I would like to do a black and white class here at Creative Live at some point, but I think it's years down the road. And so I think it's an excellent image for turning black and white, and I think you've got some good elements in there. I love the repeating pattern, of course.
I like the toning and the contrast in it.
And there's a whole science to that in black and white,
hard.
getting it right, and I'm still working on that. I'm not totally sure about the big angle in the bottom right-hand corner. I do like that it mimics the girders that are kind of right above it, and so that part is pretty good. And there's kind of a nice angle where it's cutting the railroad lines. I would like to visit this environment myself because I think there's many different other angles that can be exploited. All right, let's move on. And so, is this a pre-shoot for a wedding? I'm not sure. Chosen a good time of year in this location with the fall foliage there. They got a long lens, getting the shallow depth of field. And so I think it's a nice shot of the couple. It's clean, it's colorful. I think the framing on it is pretty nice. Any suggestions?
I mean, I know how this stuff goes. So I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like it'd be cool if there was like a umbrella of like a different color, a solid color or something like that. But I know if you did that, it would change the lighting on their face, which is maybe why they did clear. But for me, the clear umbrella kind of like takes all of my focus away from everything.
It's a very
else,
artificial element in a
Yeah.
very natural world.
Right.
And so, yeah, I would agree with that if you can choose the umbrella choice, there might have been a better choice with that. I mean, it's good for lighting reasons.
Yeah.
All right, and let's try a little close-up here. And so close-ups, this one's from Renee Song, and close-ups in my mind are kind of an easy gimme if you get in close enough. Because there's just beautiful little colors and textures and things like that. And I don't know flowers well enough to know what this is. And so this one to me just screams color, and it's got some really nice color, and so that it's nice on its own. It's not totally sharp, and I don't know if it's supposed to be. There are elements that are sharp, but they're kind of in odd places.
I actually kind of like that about this, though. I feel like I mean, I think if it was sharp where you expect it to be sharp, it would look like any other close-up. But I don't know. I'm actually kind of, that's the one thing that I probably find most interesting about it is that
Well, it does mimic a bit more of a painting. And so when I say I think it should be sharper, if I was shooting this, what would probably happen is I would shoot the next picture sharper, and then I would say, oh, I may not like that. And then I'd go back to the first one. And so it's second guessing at this point. It's hard to tell because we don't have that mythical photograph to compare it to. All right, next up, this is from Mia. Me pronouncing names is just going to be hard. Ariana. And so I really like the shot on this. And so this is just a good moment of light, choosing light on the subject. And I think you could have shot this at any time of day, but I think this is one of the best times of day to shoot this. And then another black and white photograph here. And do you shoot much in black and white? Do you?
No, I actually just did a portrait series in black and white like a couple weeks ago, but outside of that, rarely do I shoot black and white.
It's because that's how I got started, you know, because I was back in the film days. That's, you know, really all you had. But there is a whole special look to the toning and development of it. And so it's something I encourage everyone to play around with a little bit because nowadays you can shoot raw, you can process it later into black and whites, and you can do amazing things with it. And so, yeah, definitely get out there and shoot some black and white. All right. Ever do sports photography, action photography?
I did once, and then I never did it again.
And so going down to the motorcycle track, and so we got a slow shutter speed shot, which I love action and slow shutter speeds because that, you know, shows us where the action is, shows us what's moving. I do a lot of panning stuff, and the thing on this shot is I just want to move to the right, wherever, if there's another spot to shoot a little bit to the right, or shooting this cyclist just a little bit before because we're starting to get onto the back side of them. And it's harder to get good shots on the back side of them. And generally you want to shoot kind of as they're coming up perpendicular to you. And then generally speaking, you can stop shooting once they get straight in front of you. And so I kind of feel like they're riding away and not in a great way. But I think it's a good choice of shutter speed because when you're shooting action and you're doing these slow shutter speeds, finding that right mix where there's a little bit of sharpness but some fun blur in there. And I think they nailed it on the shutter speed. And you just got to keep shooting and watch those backgrounds. It's a little bit messy, a little bit bright in the upper parts of the background. All right, a couple more to choose from here. Okay, Nadine Whitcamp. All right, so you're our portrait expert here. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, the lighting is nice. They have a good handle on light and control. I guess I'm trying to. For me personally, I guess I don't know like what it says or what I'm supposed to be feeling about it. It seems like she's kind of. I'm not sure about the expression, so I'm not really sure like if it was a portrait for the person or if it was about them for a story or something. But certainly I like that they're exploring with environment and their lighting seems to be coming from a good place. And the post, they certainly, if that was, it looks like it was maybe some post involved. But I would just say keep shooting. I would say really think about expression and subject and how that is meant to relate to the overall image. But it's a nice, well-lit portrait.
It's good insight. Now, for me, it feels like she's sitting behind a store window that's reflecting out, but you can't see the photographer in the reflection, or it's a composite. And I'm not sure which.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I assumed it was a composite, not because they did anything wrong, but it just seemed like it would be a composite. If they actually lit that out on location, I think they did a great job of balancing the light and that sort of thing.
Okay, see now, Now I'm starting to see it on location, but at first it felt like the lights were a reflection in a window that was
I
in
see.
front of her. It was
Okay.
like she was sitting in a storefront.
Oh, right.
And part of the thing that threw me off, I think, is the person's logo, because they have Imagine Photography there.
And you thought that was the store window? Oh, yeah.
It almost felt like that was the store.
Gotcha.
I know that was the logo, but it felt like it was the store window. But yeah, if that was all out on location, that's a lot of work to get all the props and get everything set up out there. All right, so a little bit of a fun one for our last one here. John, what was your original statement?
This can't be real. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was like jumping and it just happened to do this, but I can't believe that that's real.
So Gert Wiegen, a good moment here.
Which I don't want to take away from. I love it. I think it's hilarious. So I don't want to take away from. I don't want to be thinking about whether it's real or not, even though I said that. But
I'm going with it's real. I think it's real. Planet Earth 2 is coming out, and they have this little video of a mouse on one strand of grass that's kind of falling around.
Really?
And so like they might crawl up a piece of grass. I don't know if he's eating some of the flowers or something there. The one thing that's just throwing me off a little bit is the aspect ratio of the image, and I don't know if this is exactly 1:1, and so. Okay, it is. I guess I wasn't used to the square. I was going to say I prefer squares to something a little bit longer. It felt a little bit taller, and so obviously they're cropping this, I think, just to get in tighter and maybe get rid of some distracting elements there. But this is a good moment. We don't have full resolution here, so I can't tell on sharpness. But they got a great moment.
yeah, it's pretty.
They definitely got a great moment. All right, so that concludes our image review. John, thanks a lot for sitting in on me with this and helping out. I hope all of you were able to pick up something from that. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time around.